Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going deep into a really chilling case.
Oh, yeah.
Raymond Lassor,
Mm-hmm.
convicted serial killer,
Right.
terrorized Providence, Rhode Island back in the 1980s.
Yeah.
You've shared some excerpts from his Wikipedia page with us.
I have.
And we're not just going to hit the key facts.
Okay.
We're going to explore what makes this case stand out.
Right.
Both in its brutality and in its legal ramifications.
It's a fascinating case.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
it's not just a horrific series of crimes.
Right.
It's also a window into a particular moment in American history
Okay.
when the public and the justice system were wrestling with how to respond to violent crime.
So let's set the scene for our listener.
Okay.
It's the summer of 1984.
Mm-hmm.
Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay.
3 women are found murdered within a 5-block radius,
Wow.
all near a bus depot.
Mm-hmm.
Each victim was strangled.
Oh, my God.
Each left partially clothed.
Oh, wow.
That screams serial killer, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
The similarities in the crimes,
Right.
the location,
Yeah.
the victim profiles, all of that points to a single perpetrator.
Right.
And you can imagine the pressure on the police.
Oh, yeah.
They knew they had a predator on their hands.
Right.
And that he could strike again at any moment.
And the victims themselves, Lori Carlucci, Wanda Sue Adams, and Dolores Neusser,
Mm-hmm.
their ages and backgrounds were so different.
Right.
22, 18, and 58.
Yeah.
It really shows how serial killers don't discriminate, does it?
Absolutely true.
This randomness, it
Yeah.
just adds to the terror.
It shatters any illusion of safety, doesn't it?
Right.
It's a stark reminder that anyone, anywhere could become a target.
Now, there's a 4th victim in this story,
Okay.
and this is where the case takes a turn.
All right. Tell us
Now,
how...
Carrie Ann Talbot,
Carrie Ann was only 14 years old.
14.
She survived her attack, thankfully. But the brutality she endured was unimaginable.
Oh, gosh.
Beaten,
Yeah.
sexually assaulted.
Oh,
I
my
mean,
goodness.
her face stopped on so badly that she lost sight in one eye.
It's hard to fathom the terror she must have felt.
Yeah.
But incredibly, her bravery was key to breaking the case open.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Despite her injuries,
Wow.
Carrie Ann was able to give police a description of her attacker,
Okay.
who she called Ray.
Ray.
She also mentioned he was a pimp who hung out around the downtown bus station.
That's a solid lead.
Mm-hmm.
Did that take them straight to Lassor?
It did.
Wow.
They showed Carrie Ann and a friend photos of suspects,
Okay.
and both identify Raymond Lassor,
Uh-huh.
an unemployed drifter known to frequent the bus station.
So the net closes in.
Right.
What happened once Lassor was arrested?
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
And it's crucial for understanding not just Lassor's fate,
Right.
but the evolution of sentencing in Rhode Island.
Okay.
Lassor not only confessed to assaulting Carrie Ann,
Mm-hmm.
he confessed to all 3 murders.
Wow.
And get this,
Yeah.
he gave details about the crime scenes that only the killer would know.
A confession like that,
Yeah,
plus corroborating details,
right.
that must have felt like a slam dunk for the prosecution.
Oh, yeah,
Did his lawyer try to challenge it at all?
he did.
Okay.
Lassor's lawyer, Russell Solito, argued that the confession had been coerced by the police
Mm-hmm.
and therefore shouldn't be admissible.
Okay.
He also tried to discredit Carrie Ann Albert's testimony,
Right.
claiming she had blacked out during the attack
Uh-huh.
and couldn't reliably identify Lassor.
So he was fighting on 2 fronts,
Yeah.
both the physical evidence and the eyewitness account.
Exactly.
What was the prosecution's response to that?
The prosecutor, Jeffrey Pine, had a very strong case.
Oh, yeah.
He had the confession,
Right.
which, while challenged,
Yeah.
still carried weight.
Mm-hmm.
And even more damning was the physical evidence.
Right.
They found fingerprints at each crime scene,
Wow.
directly linking Lassor to the murders.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty undeniable.
Fingerprints, they really are the ultimate smoking gun, aren't they?
They are.
So even with Solito's attempts to discredit the confession and the eyewitness testimony, it sounds like Lassor was in a very difficult position.
He was.
Yeah.
The evidence was overwhelming.
Right.
And it's interesting because this case happened right as Rhode Island was enacting a brand new life without parole statute.
Really?
This law was specifically designed for the most heinous crimes.
Okay.
And the Lassor case became a test case in a way.
So this wasn't just about convicting Lassor of these particular crimes.
Right.
It was setting a precedent for how this new law would be applied in the future.
Exactly.
That adds a whole other layer of complexity to the case, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You can see how the stakes were high.
Right.
Not just for Lassor,
Mm-hmm.
but for the state of Rhode Island.
Right.
They wanted to make sure this statute,
Yeah.
which was designed to protect the public from the worst offenders, was applied correctly and effectively.
Yep. And for our listener,
Yep.
it's worth noting that the life without parole statute isn't a simple thing.
Yeah.
It's not just about being found guilty.
No.
There are specific criteria that have to be met, specific circumstances that have to be considered
Right.
before a judge can hand down that kind of sentence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The law requires a separate sentencing hearing after a guilty verdict,
Okay.
where the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is a danger to society.
Right.
And that no other sentence would be appropriate.
Wow.
Think of it like a trial within a trial.
So back to Lassor.
Okay.
What were the specific arguments made during this sentencing phase?
Right.
What did the prosecution focus on?
The prosecutor really hammered home the brutality of the crimes.
Right.
He pointed to the sheer randomness of the victims, the fact that Lassor preyed on vulnerable women,
Right.
the chilling details of the murders,
Yeah.
and of course the horrific attack on Carrie Ann Talbot.
It sounds like he was painting a picture of Lassor as someone who was beyond rehabilitation, someone who posed a permanent threat to the community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he also brought up Lassor's past criminal record,
Okay.
which included prior convictions for assault and robbery.
Wow.
Pine was essentially arguing that Lassor had a pattern of violent behavior
Uh-huh.
and that a life sentence without parole was the only way to protect society from him.
Now, what about Solito Lassor's defense attorney?
Yeah.
How did he counter those arguments?
Right.
Was there any room for arguing against such a harsh sentence?
Solito had a very difficult task ahead of him.
Yeah.
He acknowledged the horrific nature of the crimes,
Right.
but he tried to portray Lassor as a product of his environment,
Okay.
someone who had been failed by the system.
So rather than denying the facts of the case,
Mm-hmm.
he was trying to offer context,
Yeah,
maybe even a glimmer of hope for rehabilitation.
precisely.
Yeah.
He argued that Lassor had a troubled childhood,
Okay.
that he had suffered from mental health issues,
Right.
and that he had never received proper treatment.
Interesting.
He was essentially asking the jury to see Lassor as a human being,
Right.
not just a monster.
It's a classic defense strategy, isn't it?
It is.
Trying to humanize the defendant
Right.
to appeal to the jury's sense of compassion.
Yeah.
Did it work in this case?
It's a powerful strategy for sure.
Yeah.
But in this instance, with the weight of the evidence and the public outcry surrounding the case,
Right.
it wasn't enough.
So the jury ultimately found Lassor.
Guilty on all counts.
Wow.
And the judge, after hearing the arguments during the sentencing phase,
Right.
agreed with the prosecution.
Mm-hmm.
He sentenced Raymond Lassor to life in prison without the possibility of parole,
Wow.
making him the first person in Rhode Island to receive this sentence under the new statute.
A landmark decision.
It
A
was?
turning point in Rhode Island law.
Yeah.
But as you said earlier, it wasn't just about Lassor.
Right.
This case set a precedent.
Mm-hmm.
And it had ripple effects far beyond the courtroom, didn't it?
It did.
Tell us about that.
It did. Lassor's case, as you said earlier, become a flashpoint.
Yeah.
It happened at a time when violent crime was on the rise across the U.S.
Right.
And there was this growing sense of fear,
Mm-hmm.
a demand for tougher sentencing,
Yeah.
for a way to protect the public from people like Lassor.
And Lassor, he became the face of that shift, didn't he?
He did.
His case, with all its brutality,
Right.
became an argument for why life without parole was necessary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It provided a concrete example
Right.
for lawmakers, for prosecutors, for the public to point to and say,
Yeah.
this is why we need these kinds of laws.
Right.
This is what happens when we don't have them.
And for our listener, I think it's important to acknowledge that this debate, the debate over life without parole,
Right.
it's still very much alive today.
It is.
There are people who believe it's just punishment,
Mm-hmm.
that it provides a sense of closure for victims' families, that it protects society.
And there are others who argue that it's cruel and unusual punishment,
Right.
that it goes against the very principles of rehabilitation and redemption that our justice system should be built on.
It's a complex issue.
It is.
With no easy answers.
No.
But cases like Raymond Lassor's,
Yeah.
they force us to confront these questions,
Right.
to really grapple with what we believe justice means.
And to think about the consequences of our choices,
Right.
both as individuals and as a society.
Yeah.
What kind of world do we want to live in?
Mhm.
What do we believe is the purpose of punishment?
Right.
What does it mean to truly hold someone accountable for their actions?
Big questions.
Yeah.
And ones that linger long after the gavel comes down, don't they?
They do, and I think that's what makes this case and cases like it so compelling.
Right.
They're not just about the facts of crime.
Mm-hmm.
They're about our values, our beliefs, our understanding of right and wrong.
We've taken you deep into the Raymond Lassor
We
case.
have.
The murders, the investigation, the trial, the landmark sentence, and the broader societal debate that it ignited.
Right.
It's a chilling story, but it's also a story that offers us a chance to reflect on some of the most fundamental questions about justice, about punishment, about the kind of society we want to create.
And for you listening, I'd leave you with this.
Okay.
What do you think about life without parole?
Yeah.
Is it ever justified?
Good question.
What are the alternatives?
Right.
These aren't easy questions, but they're ones worth pondering.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.